Do you find yourself struggling to stay consistent when working towards your goals and avoiding work and procrastinating? And you wonder, why can't I be consistently disciplined towards my work when I love what I do? If that sounds like you, then I'm here to tell you that that isn't a discipline problem and it isn't a consistency problem. It's something else entirely. And in this video, I'll teach you what the real issue is that's causing you to procrastinate, avoid your work, and be inconsistent with your productivity. And I'll also teach you how to fix that problem so that you can get into a state of consistent, productive flow. So to share with you what the real issue is that's keeping you inconsistent, I'm going to share a personal story. Back when I was a child, I was really naturally motivated toward things that I love to do. And I love to do a lot of things. I was very creative, and I also enjoyed things like schoolwork that I was doing. I was just naturally drawn toward it. And so back then, consistent productivity came easily to me. But then when I was a teenager, I started to develop a really, really strong value around having a good work ethic. And the work that I had to do started to become more cumbersome. Like there was just a lot of work to do. And because there was a lot of work to do, what would end up happening is I would put off my work until the last minute, and then I would just throw 100% productivity into it and get it done so that I don't miss the deadline. And then what would happen is that I would come to associate work with duress and like this really stressful time where it's like, oh no, I got to get everything done. Otherwise, I'm not going to reach the deadline and it's going to be terrible. And so what would happen then is I would just avoid doing the productive work because I associated it with duress. And I associated it with forcing myself to do something that I didn't want to do. And so this led to this cycle of put off work until the last minute, throw everything into it and force myself to do it, then avoid work like the plague, and then go back through that same process over and over and over again. And then here's the kicker with it. Whenever I had something I really wanted to do that wasn't expected of me from some external source, and it was just something, hey, I have this goal that I want to do, or I have this project that I want to bring to fruition, what would happen is that I would rebel from that. I then needed that sense of duress even to get myself to do the work. And I would just rebel from any kind of productive work of any kind, even if it's productive work that I love doing. And so from a neurochemical perspective, what used to happen when I was a kid is I used to be really motivated towards that work from like the dopamine pathway, the thing that would just naturally make me motivated in that direction that I had a natural pull towards. But once I got into my teen years and I started to associate work with duress and working really, really hard at the last minute to get everything done, it was all about pushing myself and forcing myself. And I really relied on cortisol and adrenaline to get myself to do productive work. And without cortisol and adrenaline, I didn't get any work done at all. And so what would happen is whenever I had a day off and I had nothing to do, I might have wanted to write or I might have wanted to paint, but I would just do nothing. And when I had my own personal goals of something that I wanted to reach off in the future that didn't have external authority figures imposing deadlines on me, I just wouldn't do them. So in this, for a long while, I had a really negative relationship with work, any kind of productive work. And I would often think to myself, oh, I'm so lazy, I'm so undisciplined, why can't I just be disciplined? But the reality was that I was conditioning myself to associate work with duress and punishment. And so I was negatively reinforcing myself around work. And so back then I was really developing this very negative relationship with work where I was essentially operant conditioning myself to associate work with duress and punishment. And I've seen so many other people erode their relationship with work the same exact way. And to explain a little bit about operant conditioning, think of Pavlov's dog. So Pavlov was trying to see if he could get the dog to salivate at the ring of a bell. And so what would happen is every time Pavlov would feed the dogs, he'd ring the bell first to call the dogs in, and then the dogs would eat. So that way, whenever Pavlov rang the bell, the dogs would still salivate either way. And so the dogs associated the ring of a bell with a reward. But if we come to associate sitting down to do the work with previous punishments that we've given ourselves by forcing ourselves to do things that we don't want to do and exhausting ourselves, what's going to happen is that every time we sit down to do work, we're probably going to feel pretty exhausted. We're probably going to feel pretty resistant to actually getting down to doing the work. In the same way that Pavlov's dog would associate the ringing of the bell with the food, we associate sitting down to work with the duress and the punishment. So to give an analogy, let's imagine that you're two beings in one. So let's say that you're a horse and you're the rider that rides the horse. And the rider is also like a tamer of the horse. But let's say that the rider isn't a good rider, right? It's not a good tamer. So what it does is it just tries to force the horse under duress to do what it wants it to do. And so it always uses the whip to get the horse to jump over all the hurdles or to run forward or to jump through a hoop. And so instead of having any kind of positive reward associated with the horse doing what the rider wants them to do, the horse just comes to associate all productive work that the rider wants them to do with duress and with punishment and with being whipped. And so naturally what happens is the horse starts rebelling from the rider because the rider is associated with the whip as well. And then it basically lays down eventually and just refuses to do any kind of work at all. And this is essentially what happens within us when we come to associate work with duress and with punishment. We end up negatively reinforcing the very things that we want to get ourselves to do. And we are essentially training ourselves as a human animal. And so if we tend to force ourselves into doing something like productivity, we're going to associate productivity off into the future with force. And naturally, if you try to force yourself to do something, what's going to happen is you're going to rebel from that thing. And so what you've been thinking of as a consistency issue or a discipline issue really isn't either of those things. Instead, what's happened is that you are rebelling from yourself because there's part of you that doesn't want to be forced to do what it doesn't want to do. And now work has become associated with all of this punishment, and so it naturally makes you resist doing the work. And oftentimes what happens here is that we end up doubling down on the thing that's causing the problem in the first place. It's like, oh, I'm not being disciplined enough, so I need to be even harder on myself. I need to force myself more to do the work that I need myself to do. And then, of course, what happens is we end up conditioning ourselves even more to associate work with duress. And so that's why it's really important to get out of this cycle, because if all we have is negative motivation to push us forward, we end up having to use the whip to get ourselves to do anything at all. And then doing anything at all becomes associated with the whip. And then all we can want is to do nothing because doing nothing feels like freedom. Now, if this is resonating with you so far and you want to develop consistent, frictionless productivity towards your goals, then I highly recommend checking out my free webinar, 3 Shadow Work Secrets to Get Out of Your Own Way and Reach Your Full Potential Without Having to Fight Yourself. And the link is down below in the description box. So how do we solve this problem? So if you're somebody who has already come to associate work with the whip, or like trying to move away from what's negative instead of going towards what's positive, how do you actually change things up? How do you get yourself to develop a better relationship with work so that you can experience frictionless, consistent productivity over time? So the first thing that you have to do is you have to change your motivation from negative motivation to positive motivation. So if you're motivating yourself because, oh no, if I don't hit this deadline, negative things will happen, or if I don't get this done, X, Y, and Z will happen, that ends up being self-reinforcing, where it's like, oh no, if I don't get this done, that bad thing will happen. And then we require something negative off in the future that might happen in order to motivate ourselves altogether. Instead, you want to start motivating yourself towards, oh, if I do this, this positive thing will happen. Now, the second thing that I recommend here is to commit yourself to never maxing out your productivity. In order to max out your productivity, you have to use duress, you have to use negative motivation. So there's a saying that goes something like, if you want to go fast, use negative motivation. If you want to go far, use positive motivation. And so for a sprint, you use all of your energy when you're negatively motivated. That's like, oh no, I'm being chased by the lion. Oh no, here's the deadline and I need to get things done by the deadline. But positive motivation is where, you kind of go between 40% to 60% of your motivation, and things are a lot more stable when you positively motivate yourself. So if we think about the story of the tortoise and the hare, we could think of the tortoise as being positively motivated while the hare is negatively motivated. And so what happens with the hare is that it's like a really, really sharp burst, 100% speed, and then a crash. And so basically the hare ends up like being super speedy, but going to sleep and then sleeps through the rest of the race while the tortoise wins. And so the hare is like that sprint and then crash. Whereas the tortoise has that marathon type of motivation where you get little peaks and troughs of motivation, but you never max it out, but you also never crash. And this is a really common thing that I've seen with many of my clients who've been entrepreneurs who try to go monk mode and they try to max out their motivation and they go to 100% and they crash and they can't do anything for 2 or 3 weeks. And then they max out their motivation again for a week and then they crash. And so to avoid that kind of cycle, you want to commit to being more moderate in the way that you motivate yourself. Now, if this is something that you're struggling with and you're looking for support so that you can develop a better relationship with work and be more consistent with your productivity, then I highly recommend clicking the link down below in the description to apply to work with me. And if your application is accepted, I'll reach out to you to schedule a free discovery call to see if we're a good fit to work together. Another thing that's really important to do is to motivate yourself internally instead of externally. So if you are motivating yourself because, oh no, the boss is expecting me to get this done by the deadline, or oh, if I don't get this done, this negative thing will happen. If that's fundamentally what motivation is for you, what's going to happen is that's going to erode your relationship with productive work. Instead, you want to be more intrinsically motivated. So based off of, I want to do this, and so now I'm going to set out to do this thing that I want to do, which again comes back to that same point about positive motivation. Another thing that's really important for repairing your relationship with work so that you can be more consistent is to work with your natural motivational style. So that means that don't try to force yourself to work in ways that you don't naturally feel comfortable working. For example, if you're a really task-oriented person and you can really get into a task, but you're doing something that's very time-oriented, like the Pomodoro method, that's probably not going to work for you. Or if you're somebody who needs to be more intuitive, but everybody that you know is really, really structured and puts things into a schedule. And so you start trying to motivate yourself that way, where it's okay, from 6 to 7 o'clock, I'm going to do things this way. Or vice versa. If you're somebody who really, really thrives with everything really scheduled out and you try to work intuitively and that totally gets in your way, what's going to happen is you're going to be forcing yourself out of alignment with your natural motivational rhythm. So it's really important to know the way that you naturally work and to work with your natural motivational style. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but the final thing on this list that I recommend you try out is to be very, very attuned to your body and to be very attuned to your energy levels and your natural motivational rhythms. And I call this surfing your own ocean. If we imagine a surfer who's going out into the ocean and there's certain currents in the ocean, but then waves come in periodically, and the surfer wants to hit a wave. And so let's say hitting the wave is like getting into a productive flow with your work. And so if the surfer tries to control where those waves come up, what's going to happen is that the surfer is going to try to operate like it's going on a wave when it's actually running into a kind of resistance. And so you want to attune to your natural rhythms, your own resistances, and you want to use that to actually surf the wave of your own motivational currents. That means being very attuned to your energy levels, being very attuned to your resistances, and being able to use that in the direction of your productive work. That way you're not trying to control and force yourself from a top-down perspective to just get through it and do the work. Instead, you start motivating yourself more based off of what comes naturally from the inside, from the bottom up. Now, as I said before, it's really important to approach productivity from a space of positive motivation instead of negative motivation. That means going towards what you want and not going away towards what's unwanted. And a big part of discovering what it is that you want is by finding your North Star, figuring out what's really the most meaningful thing that you can pursue in this life. And so if you want to learn more about how to find your North Star and how to get more clarity on it, I recommend you check out this video right here.